An historic report has called for sweeping changes to a raft of Victorian laws to address what it calls gross human rights violations in Victoria's child protection and criminal justice systems. The Yoorrook Commission tabled its scathing findings today. After a year of investigation, it's found the justice and protection systems for Indigenous people are broken and has made an unequivocal call for First Nations people to get real decision-making power. It's the nation's first truth-telling forum, which, along with voice and treaty, is one of the pillars of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And Yoorrook says the truths it's uncovered are grim.
We've heard of children being in youth detention, being locked up for long periods of times in their cells. Where are the human rights in that?
Among its 46 recommendations, the Commission's calling for changes to a range of legislation, including new bail laws that go beyond the state's recent proposed reforms, a new independent police oversight body to stop the force investigating all but the most minor complaints about its own officers, an increase of the minimum age of criminal responsibility to 14 years and no detention for children under 16, the banning of routine strip searching in all Victorian adult and youth prisons, and eventually a transfer of power to give self-determination in both the child protection and criminal justice systems. But while the state government has welcomed the report, there's no indication it'll meet the Commission's 12-month deadline for the most urgent changes. Here's Kate Ashton.
Beginning with a smoking ceremony, the Yoorrook Justice Commission launched its landmark report calling for an overhaul of Victoria's criminal justice and child protection systems, which it found have failed First Peoples.
This is not just Aboriginal truth. This is the true history of our people in this state of Victoria.
We heard stories of racism, discrimination, of injustice and trauma.
This report represents the most comprehensive examination of its kind in this state's history.
Following a year-long investigation, the First Peoples-led inquiry, which has the powers of a royal commission, handed the government 46 recommendations. It's calling for better oversight, more power, and eventually a handover of systems like child protection to First Peoples. Yoorrook wants police to stop investigating police complaints. It's recommended statewide training for workers in youth justice, corrections and child protection to stamp out racial bias. On areas like bail reform and raising the age of criminal responsibility to 14, where some progress has been made, the Commission wants the state to go further and faster, implementing the urgent changes within 12 months.
The recommendations that Yoorrook have presented are fair and achievable within a 12-month time frame.
We can't have treaty without truth-telling.
The democratically elected Voice for Victoria, the First Peoples Assembly, will incorporate Yoorrook's plan into its upcoming statewide treaty negotiations.
With treaty now, we can reimagine what some of those systems look like.
I don't think setting up a totally separate Aboriginal system in Victoria is necessarily the way forward.
It's the first time in Australian history a government will be forced to respond to such a major reform agenda put forward by its own truth-telling commission. The Victorian government says it will carefully consider Yoorrook's recommendations, but Yoorrook's commissioners are pushing for action.
We are not going to tinker around the edges here. We're talking about real change. We've had over 200 years of a colonial system that needs to change.
Kate Ashton, ABC News, Melbourne.